The Sphingidae are a family of moths, commonly known as hawk moths, sphinx moths, and hornworms. It includes about 1,450 species. It is best represented in the tropics, but species are found in every region. They are moderate to large in size and are distinguished among moths for the rapid, sustained flying ability. Their narrow wings and streamlined abdomens are adaptations for rapid flight. Some hawk moths, such as the hummingbird hawk moth or the white-lined sphinx, hover in midair while they feed on nectar from flowers, so are sometimes mistaken for hummingbirds. This hovering capability is only known to have evolved 4 times in nectar feeders. In hummingbirds, certain bats, hoverflies, and these sphingids have been much studied for their flying ability, especially their ability to move rapidly from side to side while hovering, called swing hovering or side slipping. This is thought to have evolved to deal with ambush predators that lie in wait in flowers. Sphingids are some of the faster-flying insects. Some are capable of flying at over 5.3 meters per second. They have wingspans from 4 to over 10 centimeters. Life cycle. Most species are multivoltine, capable of producing several generations a year if weather conditions permit. Females lay translucent greenish, flattened, smooth eggs, usually singly on the host plants. Egg development time varies highly, from 3 to 21 days. Sphingid caterpillars are medium to large in size, with stout bodies. They have 5 pairs of prolegs. Usually, the bodies lack any hairs or tubercles, but most species have a horn at the posterior end, which may be reduced to a button or absent. In the final instar, many are cryptic greens and browns, and have counter-shading patterns to conceal them. Others are more conspicuously colored, typically with white spots on a black or yellow background along the length of the body. A pattern of diagonal slashes along the side is a common feature. When resting, the larva usually holds its legs off the surface and tucks its head underneath, which, resembling the Egyptian sphinx, gives rise to the name sphinx moth. Some tropical larvae are thought to mimic snakes. Larvae are quick to regurgitate the sticky, often toxic, foregut contents on attackers such as ants and parasitoids. Development rate depends on temperature, and to speed development, some northern and high-altitude species sunbathe. Larvae burrow into a soil to pupate, where they remain for 2 to 3 weeks before they emerge as adults. In some Sphingidae, the pupa has a free proboscis, rather than being fused to the pupal case as is most common in the Macrolepidoptera. They have a cremaster at the tip of the abdomen. Usually, they pupate off the host plant, in an underground chamber, among rocks, or in a loose cocoon. In most species, the pupa is the overwintering stage. Description. Antennae are generally not very feathery, even in the males. They lack tympanial organs, but members of the group Chorocampini have hearing organs on the heads. They have a frenulum and retinaculum to join hind wings and forewings. The thorax, abdomen, and wings are densely covered in scales. Some sphingids have a rudimental proboscis, but most have a very long one, which is used to feed on nectar from flowers. Most are crepuscular and nocturnal, but some species fly during the day. Both males and females are relatively long-lived. Prior to flight, most species shiver the flight muscles to warm them up, and, during flight, body temperatures may surpass 40 degrees Celsius. In some species, differences in form between the sexes is quite marked. For example, in the African species Agrius convolvuli, the antennae are thicker and wing markings more mottled in the male than in the female. Only males have both an undivided frenular hook and a retinaculum. Also, all male hawk moths have a partial comb of hairs along their antennae. Females call males to them with pheromones. The male may douse the female with a pheromone before mating. Behavior. Some species fly only for short periods either around dusk or dawn, while other species only appear later in the evening and others around midnight. But such species may occasionally be seen feeding at flowers during the day. A few common species in Africa, such as Cephinodes hylas fluorescens, Macroglossum hirundo, and Macroglossum trochilus, are diurnal. Flight. In studies with Manduca sexta, moths have dynamic flight sensory abilities due to their antennae. The antennae are vibrated in a plane so that when the body of the moth rotates during controlled aerial maneuvers, the antennae are subject to the inertial Coriolis forces that are linearly proportional to the angular velocity of the body. The Coriolis forces cause deflections of the antennae, which are detected by the Johnston's organ at the base of each antenna, with strong frequency responses at the beat frequency of the antennae and at twice the beat frequency. The relative magnitude of the two frequency responses enables the moth to distinguish rotation around the different principal axes, allowing for rapid course control during aerial maneuvers. Food plants. Larvae. Sphingidae larvae tend to be specific feeders, rather than generalists. Compared to similarly sized saturniids, sphingids eat soft young leaves of host plants with small toxic molecules, and chew and mash the food into very small bits. Some species can tolerate quite high concentrations of specific toxins. Tobacco hornworms, Manduca sexta, detoxify and rapidly excrete nicotine, as do several other related sphinx moths in the subfamilies Sphingidae and Macroglossinae. But members of the Smyrninae that were tested are susceptible. The species that are able to tolerate the toxin do not sequester it in the tissues. 98% was excreted. However, other species, such as Hyles euphorbia and Daphnes nereae, sequester toxins from the hosts, but do not pass them on to the adult stage. Most adults feed on nectar, although a few tropical species feed on eye secretions, and the death's head hawk moth steals honey from bees. Night-flying sphingids tend to prefer pale flowers with long corolla tubes and a sweet odor, a pollination syndrome known as sphingophily. Some species are quite general in visitations, while others are very specific, with the plant only being successfully pollinated by a particular species of moth. Orchids frequently have such specific relations with hawk moths, and very long corolla tubes. The comet orchid, Angricum sesquipedale, a rare Malagasy flower with its nectar stored at the bottom of a 30 cm long tube, was described in 1822 by Aubert du Petit-Thouars, and later, Charles Darwin famously predicted there must be some specialized animal to feed from it. Nectar is 11.5 inches long, with only the lower inch and a half filled with very sweet nectar. It is, however, surprising that any insect should be able to reach the nectar. Our English sphinxes have proboscis as long as the bodies, but in Madagascar there must be moths with proboscis capable of extension to a length of between 10 and 12 inches. Alfred Russel Wallace published a sort of wanted poster of what this butterfly might look like, and, concurring with his colleague, added, "From tropical Africa is 7 inches and a half. A species having a proboscis 2 or 3 inches longer could reach the nectar in the largest flowers of Angricum sesquipedale, whose nectaries vary in length from 10 to 14 inches. That such a moth exists in Madagascar may be safely predicted, and naturalists who visit the island should search for it with as much confidence as astronomers searched for the planet Neptune." and they will be equally successful. A possible species was discovered 21 years later, for which the hawk moth in question was found and described as a subspecies of the one mentioned by Wallace, Xanthopan morgani praedicta, for which the subspecific name praedicta was given. The subspecies has, however, been subsequently declared as invalid due to its similarity to mainland species. Relationships and species. The Sphingidae is sometimes assigned its own exclusive superfamily, Sphingoidea, but is alternatively included with the more encompassing Bombycoidea. Following Hodge's, two subfamilies are accepted, namely the Sphingidae and Macroglossinae. Around 1,450 species of hawk moths are classified into around 200 genera. Some of the best-known hawk moth species are privet hawk moth, death's head hawk moth, lime hawk moth, poplar hawk moth, convolvulus hawk moth, catalpa sphinx, hummingbird hawk moth, elephant hawk moth, vine hawk moth, spurge hawk moth, oleander hawk moth, Pandora sphinx moth, tomato worm. In popular culture, John Linnell of the rock band They Might Be Giants reportedly wrote the song "Be of the Bird of the Moth" after he saw a hummingbird moth, presumably one of the members of this family that resembles a hummingbird. Edgar Allan Poe includes a sphinx moth in his short story, The Sphinx. The main character mistakenly thinks the moth on a window is a huge monster. Much to his surprise, his friend points out it is, in fact, very close and not on a hill in the distance. In the 1991 film Silence of the Lambs, Buffalo Bill's calling card involved putting sphinx moths in the throats of his victims after he kills them. A sphinx moth is also featured on the cover. The show The Ghost Whisperer has a reference to the sphinx moth when they fly out of a girl's locker. In the anime Knights of Sidonia, a recurring extraterrestrial antagonist goes by the codename the Crimson Hawk Moth. The TV show Miraculous Ladybug, the main villain's name is Hawk Moth. With the moth Miraculous, he has the power to turn regular people into supervillains.